Hey traders, welcome to the weekly game plan for FX commodities and crypto. Starting with the dollar, as always, the dollar is the real key point at the moment in the markets. We really want to understand that we're sitting at a level that is very potentially seeing a turn in the dollar to back towards a dollar strength environment. And that dollar strength environment really changes everything in the markets. It really changes the overall narrative that we've been trading since the corona outbreak back in March. Late February, early March back in 2020. So at the moment, we're trading that stimulus, high liquidity, weaker dollar scenario, which has really been, to be honest with you, a fairly easy trade because we're trading that reflation trade. From here on out, we're starting to look for areas where we may start to see this turn to the upside and start to go back to a lower liquidity dollar strength environment. So if we start to see inflation, you'll start to see the Fed taper that liquidity, and taking off that liquidity will really be positive for the dollar because it takes away liquidity. It draws out liquidity from the euro dollar market, and that leads towards dollar strength. And that's really what we're looking for at the moment. Are we starting to see that turn to the upside in the dollar? As we start to see yields rise in the 10-year, we really start to see 10-year yields climbing really quickly. Which is a good indication we're going to start to see a tapering of that liquidity in the market. So we're in a key environment now where we want to look for a turn in this area. And that's in our longer term picture. But in the shorter term, it makes it tricky because are we seeing a turn in the dollar now, or are we just seeing corrective price action for a move back down towards those lows, like we said, towards that 87 level? So we don't want to miss out on those moves because that's a fairly big move from where we are now, 90.36 all the way down to 87. We don't want to miss out on that because that could be some very key short-term trading in the short term. But at the same time, it is a possibility that what we're looking at on the lower time frames is a bottoming out of the dollar in early January. And now we'd be just being in corrective price action for a continuation from here. So we're just watching, are we getting corrective price action here where we're going to start to see a little bit of a chop around in this region and then continuation of that dollar strength from here? Or did we just complete a correction in the dollar and continuation for dollar weakness moving forward? So that's where we're trying to position ourselves now. And this is where we just trying to be kind of not too dollar bullish, not too dollar bearish, just looking for opportunity. That's us. We're looking for opportunities to trade either long or short. And this week, at the moment, I'm looking for those dollar shorts just because of the price action we're getting. We've got a nice strong impulse off the highs, and we've gone into impulse, 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 impulse. When we see a whole bunch of impulses in a row, it's a good indication that what we're seeing is an expanding triangle or a contracting triangle. In this case, it looks expanding. And that means to me, we can start to look for some dollar shorts. So what we're looking for is an impulse to the downside, A, B, C, D, E, and then an impulse to the downside. So what that means this week, what I'm looking for is a break of these lows for the current wave in the dollar, a little bit of a rally in the dollar to give us our E wave. And then from there, we'll see a continuation to the downside. And that to me is a good indication that that dollar weakness theory is going to, or that dollar weakness narrative is going to continue for the next few months. So we're keeping a close eye on that. I'm not going to hold myself to that narrative. It's just a possibility that I'm looking for and something I would like to take advantage of if it does play out. So if we do see a break of these lows and we do see a rally that looks like an E wave, I really want to start to position myself for US dollar shorts moving forward. And we see the same thing in the euro US dollar, where we have a nice corrective or a nice structure, impulse down, A, B, C, D, E, impulse down. And from that, we have quite a strong impulse off the lows on this hourly chart, and we go into a kind of A, B, C, same kind of DXY scenario. Obviously, they're going to be very correlated, where we can potentially see a little bit of an expanding triangle forming. And if we see this form in towards the middle of the week, then this is the trade I'm looking for in the dollar. I'm looking for this US dollar short, or euro long is the trade I'm looking for. And what's nice about this trade is that we have a pound US dollar, basically a hedge, because the pound US dollar is showing us exact opposite of that trade. We're looking for a nice push off the lows, impulse up, ABC long, drawn out, running flat, approaching its target where we want to start to see a turn in the pound dollar, where we see the pound weaken against the dollar down towards 132, potentially even lower, given the higher time frame structure. So when we go into the lower time frames, you can see we've had a nice little rally up towards our full target, which is 140, 1401, basically. It was 1.409. So we could start to see this fade away to the downside. So it's showing us the exact opposite of the pound, which sounds confusing, but it actually gives us a good opportunity to hedge either bet. So we can look for those the pound dollar shorts, and we can look for the euro US dollar longs, and one of those should pay us quite handsomely, because there are pretty decently big moves moving forward. So it puts us in a pretty advantageous position to look for those positions this week. So could be a really lucrative week in terms of hedging the euro US dollar against the pound US dollar. When we look at the US dollar Swiss, it's kind of giving us that same scenario. I'm kind of quite keen on US dollar Swiss shorts, because what we have is a nice running flat structure, which should give us a move to the downside, at the very least to break these lows, but more likely give us a bit more of a bigger move to the downside because of the size of the correction. We could see this head down towards kind of 82 on the US dollar Swiss. So that's a really nice trade to the downside if we see this continuation of dollar weakness. But again, I'm not being tied into any of these positions, because it's still possible that what we had here was a bottoming out of the dollar Swiss. We have a strong impulse off the lows. And potentially corrective price action for dollar strength moving forward. So I want to position myself to take advantage of either of those positions. I'm not tying myself to one or the other. I want to take advantage of either or, because both are fairly big trades. We're in a point where we're either going to get a strong dollar rally or a big dollar weakness move. And I want to align myself for either, like I said. So we keep a close eye to see how this develops over time, see if this gets more corrective, maybe starts to chop back up to the highs. That's a possibility. And if we see that this week, then we know we want to position ourselves for dollar strength. Otherwise, we're ready to see this chop back down to the lows, in which case we will be positioning ourselves for dollar weakness. So it's, like I said, we're not holding ourselves to any position. We're just in a point where the bulls and the bears are in full battle, and we want to take advantage of whoever wins. We want to be part of that crowd. So that's potentially the trade. And if we see that price action, we'll be looking for dollar shorts. So yeah, like I said, positioning ourselves for an either or scenario, because either or is going to be a big trade. US dollar yen, interesting to see US dollar yen rally so strongly off the lows. But it also could be one of two things. We're either seeing a break higher from here that goes into correction and shows us continuation, or if we zoom out, there's a possibility that all of this is part of a big, long, drawn-out correction, which means the next move down is a big one from these highs. Something along these lines will probably go test these lows at 100, somewhere around there on the dollar. So we want to position ourselves for both, because if we're wrong on that, the dollar is going up probably towards 126 in this case. So either or is a big trade up or down. So we were looking for that price action. You're looking for those long setups. We're looking for those short setups that gives us an opportunity to get into the dollar, whether it's to the upside or to the downside. So on the US dollar yen, there's nothing really indicating anything just yet. I would look for this to develop into a bit of an expanding triangle. So if we see the dollar, or we see the US dollar yen go break these lows and then push up back to these highs, that's going to be an indication that what we're looking for is US dollar long trades. because of the impulsive price action nature, that's kind of what I'm leaning towards at the moment. But there's also the possibility that we just get a lower time frame corrective structure, something that looks like this on, say, the hourly chart, something along those lines, in which case I would look to get short and just manage that position accordingly as time goes on with the price action, because that could be the first corrective structure of a big move to the downside. So again, I'm not tying myself to any US dollar position. I'm looking for those long and short entries, and I want to take those long or short entries. New Zealand dollar, US dollar, kind of different picture. This is more in line with a move down to the lows, which is just part of a bigger correction, which shows New Zealand dollar, US dollar strength moving forward. So I'll be looking for that this week. I may be looking for a short-term trade on the hourly chart, maybe even look to see if this little flag develops over tomorrow morning session, and then maybe take this little short trade as a flag to the downside. Little flag here and trade this down towards this 71.20, 71.0 region. So that could be a pretty decent trade in the short term. But again, all I'm looking for is dollar setups, because either way, the dollar should be moving this week, given the price action we're seeing. Silver, I maintain a bearish outlook on silver, although it's not as clean cut as I would like it to be. I was triggered into a short trade on, I think it was Friday morning. So I'm in this trade here, stop loss up here. The target is, again, a big one. I'm just looking for this as a long-term trade. Even in the short term, the target is actually just down towards these lows, given the bigger structure. So I'm in this trade at the moment, a little bit underwater. It was a low-risk position. I just put in a 1% position to see how this plays out. This could be an A, B, C corrective structure for more upside on silver, following this move to the downside, or we saw a finish complete little triangle here, a wave to the upside that is a failure, and we could be seeing a real complete turn to the downside as we stand. Again, we're just in a position where there's no clear dollar direction over the next, give it 3 months. The 3-month dollar position is very unclear. It's 50% that we're going to be seeing a very, very strong dollar. It's 50% that we're going to be seeing a really, really weak dollar. But either way, you want to be in a position to take advantage of that. So higher time frames, I'm still bearish silver. I'm just looking for the price action that says this is a good position to be in. And at the moment, I'm short silver. We've seen a fairly decent corrective structure on here. It's not the cleanest ever, but a nice little bearish move to end the day. Kind of a bearish engulfing candle to end the session on Friday. I'm hoping that continues towards this week, and I can take advantage of that. Gold, in decent profit on my gold position. I just want to see this continue to chop down. I've moved this one to break even. I'll wait to see how this develops over the week to see if this whole corrective structure is just corrective or the start of a bigger US dollar strength move, i.e. gold weakness moving forward. So I'll be watching that closely. Euro pound, zoomed out on euro pound. The structure itself is very unclear, but we have broken the lows down at this region, which is always going to be an interesting level on euro pound. So we might start to see the euro pound turn to the upside. We've seen a strong move down. This internal structure doesn't really make sense. At the moment, I'm looking at as an A wave up, a B wave down, potentially seeing a C wave to the upside. So the euro pound could start to move. And maybe that's why we're seeing this big disparity in the euro US dollar, pound US dollar, because the euro could really strengthen against the pound. And that's when we see euro US dollar take off to the upside and the pound US dollar take off to the downside. So there's nothing really clear in the structure, but if we start to see a turn to the upside in the euro pound, I would start to look for some long trades. So if we start to see a push off these lows and a decent correction or a long setup, that's a trade I would be really interested in taking. So looking for that trade. If we start to see that kind of price action, then I'll be looking for a long trade there. That's a nice MACD divergence on the 8-hour, so we can see a little bit of fade in momentum. We might start to see that turn. So that would be a trade I would be interested in as well. Euro yen, zoomed out euro yen structure still looks good to me in terms of a flat pattern. We have an impulse off the lows, which is our impulse. Then we go into a nice 1, 2, 3 down, A wave, impulse up, expanding triangle, impulse up. I'm not sure if this impulse is complete, but I would like to see this turn to the downside at some point, and that's a trade I would like to take as well. So as you can see, there's a lot of like backwards positioning, lots of short euro trades, lots of long euro trades, lots of short dollar trades, lots of long dollar trades. And the market's in a really mixed position. We don't want to be tied into that. We just want to set ourselves up to be in position to take advantage of any decent move. So watching this for a move to the downside, a turn to the downside, and a trade to the downside down towards kind of our full target at around about 123. And that, if we miss that short, regardless of that, over the next few weeks is going to be a really nice long trade. So on the short time frames, I'm looking for a potential turn. We may have seen that turn with this kind of price action. Not the cleanest setup ever. I wouldn't call this much of a flag to the downside. Maybe an 8-hour flag if you want to call it that, but it's not my ideal setup. So we'll just be keeping a close eye on this for a potential trade to the downside. Euro New Zealand, I'm still looking for that long setup. You guys know last week we were looking for a potential entry above these highs, and all we saw was a fade back down to the downside. But that doesn't change the fact that we're still looking for this big wave up to match this A wave. So we have this A wave up, we have this long chop down as a B wave, and we're looking for that impulse up. So just to show you on the lower time frames, we were looking for a long that broke down. So we never entered the trade, we just broke down. We're now back to the lows of this corrective or this descending wedge, which works just fine. We're going to break these lows. Now, again, I'm looking for an impulse off the lows, a corrective little structure on the hourly, and then I'm looking to get long that. That's going to be a really nice trade to the upside. Upside target around about 176, somewhere in there. So the structure hasn't changed. We're just looking for those long entries. We just repeat this process until we find a good long entry. And like I said, we've been repeating this process since November, looking for a long and just haven't got it yet. One of these days it's going to pay off. And when it does, it's going to pay off quite handsomely. It's going to give us a really nice risk reward ratio if we can get a nice entry on those lower time frames. Pound Oz, I'm actually going to take this off the list. It's just really, really confusing, really choppy at the moment. All we have, or let's just show you what we have and why I like it on the higher time frames, but the lower time frames have been a real mess. Higher time frames, let's go to the daily. You can see we have a really nice impulse off the highs. We go into quite a clean and clear expanding triangle, impulse up, 1, 2, 3 down, 1, 2, 3 up, 1, 2, 3 down. That's your ABCD. Nice chop up, E wave. And as you can see, big bearish engulfing candle to end the week. So in terms of a trade, I'm looking for a pound Oz short. I want to see a nice 1 hour or 4 hour corrective structure, a nice setup. As you can see, I'll just go to the hourly. You can see all we have on the hourly is a big impulse off the highs. See how bearish that is, big impulse off the highs. So I want to see this give us a really clean and clear corrective structure on hourly. I want to wait for a very clean structure, and then I'll look to get short as a continuation of that bigger structure. That could be a really nice trade if it does play out. Just to show you, if it does play out, our downside target on that trade is to go break these lows at 154, 155 in that region. So that's a very, very big trade potentially and a really clean setup. So the lower timeframes, it's been really challenging to trade. As you can see, we were looking for this short for a while now, and we keep getting pretty much the same as the Euro New Zealand. We keep getting these moves that end up reversing to the upside. We get a nice move to the downside, reverse to the upside, nice move to the downside, looks like a structure, and then takes off back to the upside. So like I said, we're just being patient, waiting for that hourly structure to trade, and then looking for that short. So very keen for this trade, so keep an eye on it. It's just been really challenging, been really testing my patience. But at the end of the day, if it continues to test my patience, the payoff is just going to be bigger in my view. So just a couple of things to be cautious of is that structure-wise, this is looking like a complete structure, which means we may get a chop up, chop down part of the structure, but I don't think so. Let's just see how it develops. Just saying, if we get this move that looks corrective, you're looking for that short. If we get a chop back up to these highs, obviously that gets that makes our thesis redundant, and we can look for different positioning. But this is the positioning I'm looking for, and that should pay off really nicely if it does play out that way. Pound Swiss, we mentioned taking this flag to the upside as a long trade, and that's paid off really nicely for you if you did. If you have, you just want to kind of choke your stops. I would move my stop up towards this 124 region. If you're in this trade, you're looking at already, you're sitting at a nice 3-to-1. So very, very nice trade. If you did take it, higher time frames, you can see structure-wise, we're sitting on the 0.786. Impulse up, A, B, C, D, E, impulse up. We're sitting on the 0.786. So you're at that point where you want to start being defensive because we're sitting close to that pound top. And a lot of these pound pairs are looking really bearish. So just be cautious. Same with the pound yen. When we zoom out on the structure, you can see how we're sitting on this A wave up, nice chop down, impulse to the upside, really touching on that 0.786. So we might push up to the 1-to-1, but given how bearish the rest of the pound pairs are looking, just really, we want to be cautious on your positioning here. Pound New Zealand is another one. Nothing in the short term for me here, but the pound short, again, looking pretty attractive in this region. You want to start to look for a push up to here and a fade to the downside. We may even be seeing the turn already because we have actually done enough in terms of this bigger structure. We've touched on the 0.618. So maybe this is a little contracting flat and we see downside from there. So you want to look for those setups, but I prefer pound Oz in this situation. But again, a lot of these pound pairs still looking really bearish, looking like they're near the top of their structures. We're going to start to see the pound move in a negative position. And that may be to do with negative rates. There's a lot of talk about, is the UK going to go into negative interest rate territory? And if they do, you really might start to see a surprise to the downside on the pound, and the pound really start to move in a weak fashion. So set yourself up for pound weakness. New Zealand dollar, yen, as you can see, we took a loss on one trade. We took break even on another. The positioning, it's still there, but yeah, you really want to start to look for this trade to the downside to play out now. And it's been 1-2 already that haven't played out. So you're kind of sitting on that final territory of whether you want to take this trade or not. We're taking this as a ABC running flat to the downside. But structure-wise, we may have had an expanding triangle. As you can see, the structure is really good for expanding triangle, and now you're just pushing up from there. So we may have had the analysis wrong. So I'd only really look for a New Zealand dollar yen short if the structure is really clean and clear. If this impulse develops into a really clean corrective structure, only then will I look to take this trade once more. So I've taken 2 already, 1 loss, 1 break even. I'll only look for another trade if the structure is really clean. Otherwise, I'm going to let this one go. And look, there's better positioning out there. Swiss yen is a really interesting one, just from a higher time frame point of view. Again, we've broken an area which is really key. As you can see, we're sitting right at these highs here, which could mean a break to the downside. And if we start to see the Swiss yen move, we could see the Swiss yen move go break to test these lows, which is a really big move. When we go into the lower time frames, you can see what a big impulse we've had off those highs. So really interesting to see such a big move off those highs. So now I'm looking for a setup to the short side. Nothing just yet, as you can see, not even a crossover on the hourly. So I want to see how this develops over time. If this starts to give us a nice corrective structure, I'm really keen on this short to the downside as a longer term short trade on the Swiss versus the yen. So I'll be watching this closely over the week to see if we get any short setups there. UK oil, no real setups just yet, but I just want to show you we're sitting right on the highs of the structure. Impulse up, ABC, impulse up. We're sitting right at the high of the structure. So long oil to me is not really on the cards just yet. I want to look for some short trades on oil and nothing really set up just yet. All I can see is a really strong impulse off the highs. So again, if this starts to develop in a fashion that gives us a nice setup, I'm looking for short oil. And again, that's dollar bullish. So this lines up with the dollar bullish scenario, which is interesting. And finally, I want to go to US Mexican first. You can see how we've had a strong impulse off the lows on the US dollar Mexican. If we zoom out all the way, structure-wise, we're sitting right at the lows of the US dollar peso. So this could start to take off to the upside. Again, we're looking for that turn in the dollar to the upside. When we go into the lower time frames, what we have is a strong impulse off the lows. And we're going into something that looks fairly corrective to me, which may indicate more dollar strength moving forward. So I want to see how this develops over time, because this could be an indication towards the US dollar strengthening. And EM would probably be the first pairs to show dollar strength compared to everything else. So interesting to see that we're seeing this on US dollar Mexican peso. The ZAR, US South African Rand, is looking interesting as well. The Brazilian real is also looking interesting towards US dollar strength. So just a couple of clues that we're seeing that US dollar strength play out. Like I said, there's a battle at the moment between dollar bulls, dollar bears. I think we're starting to see a turn in that market, but you don't want to connect yourself too tightly to any thesis. You just want to take advantage of any trades. And at the moment, the US dollar Mexican to me is looking pretty bullish. And Bitcoin continues to chop higher. If you guys remember, we said just take a look at this ABC running flat potential, and that structure has played out really nicely. But just be cautious because we're sitting right at the top of that structure. I don't think we can trade this as the correction. We have to trade that as the correction in terms of length of time. Maybe something a little bit longer, but even if we do trade this as the correction and it's a shorter correction, you're sitting at the very highs of a structure. So you want to be cautious about getting long with any conviction here. If you are long, you can hold on because obviously Bitcoin's on a bit of a tear at the moment. You don't want to get out of that momentum to the upside, but just be cautious that we're sitting at the top of a lower time frame structure. When we look at Ethereum, you can see Ethereum also sitting still in this rising wedge. It's still holding on to the structure. And this is a structure to me that's going to break down to the downside. And this is something that we're going to see if the US dollar starts to strengthen. So again, just be really cautious of crypto if you start to see the dollar strengthen, because the entire crypto thesis is that the dollar is getting printed to oblivion. It's going to toilet paper, hyperinflation. You want to be in crypto. But if the dollar starts to strengthen, especially with massive US dollar shorts unwinding, you start to see a US dollar squeeze to the upside, then crypto is really going to take a beating, in my view. A lot of people are on the wrong side of this trade. And as you can see, the structure to me is really indicative of a big move to the downside to come in crypto. It's just a matter of timing. So just be cautious of your positioning. And if you really start to see a big move to the downside, 10, 15% drawdown, that's something to me you'd want to get out and just sit on the sidelines, wait to see before you get back into crypto, because that 15% move down could be the start of a bigger move to the downside. It's not a buy the dip opportunity, in my view. You want to be on the sidelines, wait to see if that 15% move down is just part of a bigger correction for upside. You want to be patient with that move and see how things develop over time. But you don't want to hold on to that position believing that the market's just going to correct itself and continue to the upside. That's where the rookie traders are really going to get hurt in this, believing with so much conviction that this move to the downside is going to lead to a strong push to the upside. It's just a buy the dip opportunity, when in reality, you might start to see a really big bear market, maybe down towards 350 on Ethereum, a big move to the downside. So just be cautious here. Don't get sucked in like a rookie trader would into the narrative that this is just going to keep rising forever. You want to really be defensive at the moment in the crypto space, and you want to really be keeping a close eye on the dollar and what the dollar is going to be doing over the next few days / weeks / months. It's cool, guys. That's the game plan. Members, we'll see you tomorrow morning for the daily strategy where we'll set up our trades. If you're not a member just yet, you can head to xenicalytics.com/trading academy. I'll put the link in the description below, and you can set yourself up with a membership that I really believe will pay for itself over the next few weeks. So hopefully we'll see you in the members area. Cool, guys. Have a great week, and we'll chat soon.